Welcome to the Uber Mention podcast. Our mission is to provide content which fosters the expanding human consciousness in order to make us our individual and collective best selves. If you appreciate our show, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. And please leave a comment below. Without further ado, I give you the Uber Mention.
Today, our guest is steVAN, the model anarchist. You can find steVAN on Instagram at the model anarchist. And if you are out in California, you can see steVAN do live stand-up comedy. And you might want to tell us some venues towards the end of the show where people could come out and see you and support you in any way that they can. But more importantly, steVAN's on a mission. And it's a mission that we can get down with and that we totally see the merit in. And it all stems from the idea that we are our own rulers. And if you break the word anarchist down, anarchon is without slave masters, without rulers. And that's why the colloquial use of that term is not the correct way to look at anarchy. Anarchy doesn't mean no rules, no law. It just means no ruler. And so I can totally get down with that. But steVAN, what is this mission that you are really want to see happen out in California? Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
So I would love to see it first off go beyond California, but I want to touch a little bit on the anarchy, the word anarchy, like you were just saying. You know, the normal use of it is scary. It's chaos, it's death, it's violence, it's destruction. You know, and of course that's pushed on us by the rulers of our system because they don't want us to get this idea in our heads that we'd be better off without rulers. You know, and without rulers by default means self-ownership, and so you know, self-ownership to me, anarchy to me, it's really a force of nature. It's not an idea that can be tried because I own my body, and that's obvious. That's evident. You own yours. Jake, you own yours. Every dog you meet on the street, every other organism on this planet, they all own their own bodies. It's all self-ownership. And so the ideas that we can try is we can try government, which is an idea that we've been trying, and it's got some pretty terrible results. Or we can try what they call, where basically with volunteerism, we hold consent at the core of all interactions, right? And so this kind of leads into what my whole idea here is. You know, when I was a kid and it was beat in my head like, you're free, you're an American, you're free, the land of the free. And then I would go, well, then how come I have to have a driver's license? How come there's people holding a gun to my head to steal my labor? You know, I can't, at that time, I didn't think you could not pay taxes without going to jail. I didn't think that you could drive down the road or not pay your registration. And I think humanity would be so much better off if ultimately if we were to try the idea of volunteerism, where we hold consent at the core of all interactions. We could transition ourselves into more of a world of abundance as opposed to this world of manufactured scarcity that the government pushes. You know, the reason the government pushes manufactured scarcity is because they love war. War is the birth mother of government, and you can only ever raise children or raise an army from the children of the poor. You don't raise an army from the children of the rich, right? And so if we can get ourselves over into this world of abundance, then we can stop the ability for any one or two tyrants to be able to raise a global war. It's not like we'd be at complete peace, but the fallout and interactions between humans would be greatly minimized to where maybe the casualties could be in the hundreds as opposed to in the millions like it is today when we have this global warfare. So the question is, how do we get everybody on board with doing that? And it's it's a baby step sort of thing for me. Going through a lot of this sovereignty stuff, this trying to understand the contract laws that we're in and filling out all the paperwork to say, okay, I'm free now. I don't have to be bound by these codes and these statutes, which are all tyrannical. One thing that kept resonating with me is in contract law, the only thing required to breach a fraudulent contract is to discontinue to behave in accordance with it. And so as I kept going down the paperwork rabbit hole, I felt like, man, not only am I spending a lot of time I'd rather spend with my kids and my family trying to learn this stuff, but I don't think a lot of people have the patience for the paperwork to really go through it and really wrap their heads around it. And I get why you don't want to. It's like if you don't want to play Monopoly, why are you trying to read the rules of Monopoly? They're confusing. Um, and so that kind of led me to this idea. Well, if we all just in unison were defiant, then there's nothing they could do. There's nothing they could do because there's 300 million people in this country or more. I think there's more really at this point. And there's only 700,000 full-time police officers. They need us to extort ourselves. They need us to be complacent in our own extortion. And so what this eventually led me to was this idea, like, what if we all just took our license plates off on the same day? Right? A lot of people will say, oh, we should all just stop paying taxes. And I agree with that. We should all stop paying taxes. But if I stop paying taxes and then I go about my day the next day, there's no visual representation to me that anybody else has stopped paying taxes. So if we all take our license plates off, if all of a sudden on November 5th, 2024, the day of the next election, instead of going to the ballot box to vote, take your license plate off to let it be known that you want to try something completely different, a whole new system. And if we overwhelm the system with non-compliance, there's literally nothing they can do. The one thing that I like about this idea is I keep calling it my decentralized protest, because when we centralize the police, it's easy for the police to be at a deficit of 10 to 1 or 1 to 10, right? When they're in riot gear and there's a bunch of protesters and they're all in the same area, the police have the tools and the skill set to handle pushing massive amounts of people out of the way with relatively few police officers. And then I've been at protests where the police show up and then all of a sudden they're in riot gear and then all of a sudden they're shoving the protesters, corralling us and stuff like that. And when these police officers get into their riot gear and the energy levels are high and they're around other police officers in riot gear, it's impossible to reach the humanity of the person in that riot gear. And so if we take away that aspect to it, and now it's just us on the side of the road, one-on-one with a police officer, you have a lot more likelihood of being able to reach the humanity of the person. My last two pullovers, I haven't paid the DMV since 2018, and I don't have a driver's license. And my last two pullovers went, pretty darn smooth. I didn't get arrested. My car didn't get stolen. I did get a citation on the first one, but that citation, apparently the court doesn't have it anymore. But I was able to reach the humanity of the person wearing the police costume. It's easy to get riled up and go, all cops are bad and this and that and the other thing. But the truth is a vast majority, an overwhelming majority of the guys that joined the police force, they did it with altruistic intentions. They wanted to be the good guy. They wanted to protect their community. They wanted to stop the criminals and bring remedy to the victims. But join this system that is highly skilled at hijacking good intention and using it for evil and perverting it for evil. And so when you can bring a cop out of the cop citizen role and bring them into the man-on-man role, I have found in my experience the results have been preferable to
the
arguing
education
or holding
on the
court
side of
with
the
a cop on
road
the side
shtick
of the road.
doesn't end well. I've never. Yeah, maybe
Not always. I've seen it. Sometimes it does.
Well, I mean, I think what you said in your interview with Brandon was like the main thing that it would be the most counterproductive thing is like that nana boo boo, you can't get me type attitude, and that's not what anything should be about. I mean, we're all fellow human beings here.
Yeah,
we should treat everyone
as
with
I've gotten
respect, no
older,
matter what.
and really since I moved to the South, like 12 years ago, I've been here. My perception of police and policing has changed. It's much more human here. I was in Chicago for 8 years, and I mean, I've seen some really horrible stuff. I saw a guy get the shit beat out of him for taking a piss in the alley and not standing there when the cops said stay. And they beat him with batons, And then when we were standing there with our mouths open, like, holy shit, what's going on here? And she turns and looks at me and goes, "What are you looking at? You want some?" Nope. And it's just, and that's one of many encounters that I saw, and I get it. It's a big city and, whatever, but it was much more like a mafia there than here. Yeah. Here, every police encounter short of one that I've had here, they're pretty regular people and they understand, like this area is not a very rich area. So they know, man, they get it. It's not like we have hundreds of dollars to pay you for this bullshit. And a lot of times, as long as you're not a jerk, they're cool. They're cool. And now that I have not just conviction, but I actually have, I have some law behind me now, and I have an understanding of law and procedure even. Now I can talk with them. And what's funny is I'm not afraid of police encounters anymore. I haven't had a police encounter and I can't even remember how long, and it's, I don't know if it's a mentality or, I'm just not attracting it now. I'm not sure. Now that I say that, I'll get pulled over tomorrow, but you know, but I'm not worried. I'm not worried.
I used to, I like to
Yeah,
do the
yeah,
"I'm
yeah. Hey,
invisible"
man.
mantra
Sometimes
when I
it
drive.
seems to work that way. Like I have definitely driven by a cop way too fast, and he hit his lights real quick. Kind of like, hey, man, I saw you. Slow down. And didn't even pull me over. So that was cool. But to circle back to your mission, this nonviolent non-participation. That's really what you're calling for, and you're calling for it in mass. And
Right.
so few people feel empowered these days. It's really hard to do that, to feel like you have a say in anything, especially if you're plugged into the mainstream matrix of media and the nonstop, news cycle and everything else. It's not a message of empowerment. It's more like, shut up, you do what I tell you to do, and if you don't, I'm coming for you. And now they've got us. They're trying to conveniently divide everyone into these two camps that very few people really fit into. I'm not a very politically active guy, but I am definitely not a progressive, and I'm not on the other end of it either. But the funny thing is, I don't know, and I'm in deep red territory. I've never listened to anyone demand that I adopt their religion. And everyone's pretty, it's kind of live and let live. And so I don't get it.
Well, it's the titles, the media, the system. They push these titles to create division. That's one of the pillars of tyranny, is the division of the people that you're trying to control. Because if the people are divided, then they can spend their time fighting each other as opposed to turning around and fighting the tyrants. But most people, an overwhelming majority of people that you meet, are in tune with the natural laws of human interaction. Most people don't want to violate the natural laws of human interaction, which basically, again, holds consent at the core of all interactions, outside of the pursuit of justice that, we can talk about that and get in the weeds if you want. But for the most part, everybody wants peaceful conflict resolution with a justice system that is focused on rehabilitation.
No.
And that's not what we have in our current system. And in order for them to keep that, they have to keep flooding us with scare tactics. Government at its core, at its very, very core, is basically one person telling another group of people that you should be afraid of those people over there. And if you can't keep that fear going, then there's no need for government. And so this is why even within our own people, they divide us up and they try to get us mad and angry and upset with each other. Like you were just kind of saying about living in the deep South, and you haven't seen the overt racism and the people trying to force their religion on you and stuff like that. It's like I tell people all the time, I've been white my entire life. I mostly know white people. My entire family's white, and I don't know a single genuine racist. Not a single one. When I was a kid, I was taught, it was beat in my head when I was a kid. It's you judge people by the merit of their character, not by the color of their skin or the circumstances they're in. It's about what they're bringing to the table, and your skin color is actually not something you ever bring to the table. It's a silly thing to start judging people on, and it breaks society down the more we do that. This is why, like, even I just watched this funny reel on Instagram where it was just this montage of news reporters talking about the misogyny and the racism that Kamala Harris has to endure because of just that's the fear that they push. They didn't give any examples. They were just pushing.
Well, Jake,
this is what it is.
Your whole life down here, and what is your perspective? Because I'm a transplant.
Well, I think that most people are very good. Honestly, I think that there are little pockets here and there, at least at this day and time. I'm certain that in the middle of the 20th century, there was still plenty of racism to go around. But I mean, this is 2024 we're talking about here. I think that a lot of that is more than 90% out the door, like 99% out the door here. I think that it's completely on its way out, and I think that that's just going to be a thing of the past here for the most part. At least I hope so. Yeah, I mean, we have a bad reputation in the South for just based on history And I just don't think that it is an applicable thing moving forward for us. Treat each other very well here. I mean, our minority populations, especially here in Alabama and in Mississippi and Georgia, they are rather large minorities. So it's not like it's something that you rarely see and that it's just, super, like common to treat people differently. I don't see it. I'm younger, so but I've not really experienced it much in my lifetime. So I'm glad to see that change. Of course it does.
Of course,
we're not
it's out
completely.
But
it's
not
definitely
on the
not
widespread
systemic.
scale that they.
It is not a systemic thing.
Definitely
and,
not.
Like overwhelmingly, the people that you will not pull over on the side of the road and have 3 cars pass you. One will stop and make sure that you're cool and everything is okay and that you don't need a ride or you're not broke down. It's completely everybody waves at you when you pass. It's just overwhelmingly wholesome, and nice.
Oh, that's
and
good.
So I haven't, man, I'm not afraid to say because nobody really knows where I live, but I have never locked my front door ever. You'd have to be a fool to come up where we live. But anyway, it's just different. It's a very different way of being. And at least my wife had never been out of the Midwest when I brought her down here. And so when she came, it was definitely culture shock, but it was more like silly things like, what do you mean we can't buy beer on Sunday? I'm like, well, you can't buy beer on Sunday, It was just little things like that were funny. But for the most part, man, it's such a refreshing place to raise children and to like have neighbors that are nice and genuinely care for you. It's a different way of being. And I know that where you're at out in California, people see images of San Francisco or they see images of LA and they think, oh man, California's just burning down. It's a dumpster fire. And that's not the case, man. It's California's a big ass place. And there is
well, it's funny is I'm only like maybe an hour and a half from San Francisco. And I haven't been in the city since like, I don't know, maybe 2015, 2016, something like that. And, I was seeing all the news coming out of San Francisco too. And it was really like painting the way I was perceiving the city. And then this last summer, I hooked up with some guys that they do a lot of street fairs. And so we were going out to San Francisco all the time to do street fairs. And it was like, it was almost a shock to me going, oh my God, I got duped. Even San Francisco's not as bad off as these images that get shoved our way from the media and whatnot. But this all kind of speaks to, again, outside, absent of government, people are very cooperative. As humans, it's in our nature to be generous and to be cooperative and to be compassionate. Whenever you look at imagery that comes out of disaster zones or disaster area, natural disasters, like Hurricane Katrina is one that I remember the most as a kid. I just saw all these images where people were just helping people. It didn't seem to matter if they were white and black or Asian or Hispanic or whatever. It's right. I'm in a boat and you're not. I'm going to help you into my boat. And for the most part, that's how humans are. If we weren't this way, we would still be solo cave dwellers, keeping everybody away from us. But we are community oriented creatures, and we're not bad. We're not bad at all. But again, this is the fear that the system pushes on us. And when I talk about this whole take your license plates off on November 5th, I get a lot of fear pushback. Most of the fear comes from, I don't want to get arrested and I don't want my car impounded. But some of the fear is, well, if we all take our license plates off, well, then criminals are going to run amok and cars are going to get stolen and this and that. And I go, well, cars already get stolen.
Yeah.
Like the license plate's pretty easily circumventable. Like, if I was going to steal a car, I would just swap the license plate from another car that looks exactly like it, and I'm free and clear for a long period of time. So it's quelling the fear is really the next step in this goal of mine to help people understand, like, we can cooperate, and we can work together, and anything that the government claims to provide for society, free and cooperative society would provide for themselves faster, better, and cheaper.
Right. I think that if there's a huge push from the media machine and even governments worldwide to create a sort of systemic and synthetic form of divisiveness amongst all groups of people, just to keep us from working together. When I think that for the most part, that's our natural inclination, is to work together. Yeah. Well, I mean, we are we're contending with anything that's in power is keeping its power by ensuring that everyone stays pitted against one another instead of coming together as in brotherhood and sisterhood, as equals and family. I mean,
Well,
that's
Thomas
what we should
Paine has
be
one of my
striving
favorite
for.
quotes. All government
Well,
ends in tyranny. That's been unilaterally true as long as we can look back throughout history, yeah? And so why do we keep playing this game? Why do we keep pretending that this is civilized in some way, shape, or form? Uh, Government has single-handedly murdered more people than any group or individual could ever dream of doing.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
generally their own people.
absolutely,
They call it democide.
absolutely.
Yeah, but I'll tell you this. I would say that not government ends in tyranny. I would say government begins in tyranny. Even the Constitution of the United States, and it took me a long time to come to this because, I was a big believer in the Constitution and stuff for a long time. But even in the Constitution, it gives the Congress the right to levy taxes. And if you supposedly have the right to levy taxes, that means you have the right to violate consent. You can go and hold a gun to somebody's head and tell them you owe me your labor, and that's slavery. That is legitimate slavery, and we know that doesn't do well. That's tyrannical. And the Constitution is supposedly the most governmentally restrictive document that we've ever had, but it has led to the largest war machine the world has ever seen. And so, like you said, government doesn't work. I think we're getting ready to take that next step. And that next step, the big is to not have any form of centralized power. And people argue with me all the time and they'll say, "Oh, well, that won't work." And it's like, okay, because they'll say there's always going to be leaders and followers. And so, yes, there's always going to be these hierarchies, right? And right now we have hierarchies that are based on force. And the people at the top of our hierarchies, the governmental hierarchies, they maintain leadership over
That's
the
right.
people at the bottom through force by holding a gun to our heads. We should be able to shift and pivot and start forming hierarchies that are based on competence. So where the people at the top of those hierarchies are keeping their following by proving competence, by fulfilling the needs of the people that are quote unquote below them, and then the people below them in the hierarchies at any time have the right to walk away and seek out a hierarchy that better reflects their values or to start their own. It's very much ingrained in human nature that the person who holds a gun to another person's head to steal their property is never, the gun holder is never
That's
going to
right.
concern themselves with being accountable to their victim. Never. You say, "Oh, I got to feed my kids, give me all your money," and then the victim gives the gun holder the money. The gun holder is probably not going to feed his kids with it. It was probably a lie to begin with. And so we can all take a step back and go, okay, when force is
And doesn't
interjected,
it kind of
accountability
all,
is
we could
lost.
distill this back to the one fear that there's not enough. And probably the biggest lie that's ever been pushed is that we live in a place of limited resources, that there's a lack, right? That's not God's model. And I
Right.
don't care what your belief system is. And I get the sense, and I didn't ask you this out of the gate, but I get the sense that you understand natural law and at least the seven hermetic principles. And so I can't look at nature and not see a creator. Okay, so if there's a creator, and what I notice of creation,
Right.
for lack of a better term, nature, whatever you want to call it, but what I notice of creation is there's more than enough to go around. An oak tree produces way more acorns than could ever possibly grow into trees or feed squirrels or whatever, and that's true of virtually every other aspect of nature. So why would it be different with us? It's not. It's not. It's that the hierarchy that we have
Right.
subscribed to is one that, like you said, is it. This entity at the top has a monopoly on violence, and so we have to listen to them, because if we don't, then they're going to shoot us or imprison us or whatever. And so it's not because we believe in them. And now at this point, if anyone's paying any attention to any kind of media, it's certainly not because they're competent. It's like the theater at this point is gotten so ridiculous. Well, it's obvious that it's landed
Yeah.
with the people because there's so many people having conversations just like this. We're not unique. There are so many people, and that is very refreshing. And
No,
this is
there's a
something
lot
I
of
want to
people.
get into with you if you want to go off into that direction. We don't have to do it yet, but I really do believe the attempt on Trump, and I am not politically, like, I'm not a Trump guy, I'm not a Biden guy. I legally can't vote. I'm not a U.S. citizen. So, it doesn't matter. I don't have a dog in the fight. However, there has been a huge shift in consciousness since this attempt on Trump. And it was like almost palpable. And what I mean by that shift is that, the people who are kind of in the middle and just didn't really give a shit are all going, whoa, wait a minute, man, what just happened here? And we can get into that. I would rather stay more back to where we're going, and specifically with your mission. So how are you getting the message out? Is it just Instagram? Are you enlisting the help of other people? Are you doing things like podcasts like this, or like what's your angle of it?
Yeah, I'm jumping on all the podcasts I can to talk about it. And then Instagram's where I've got the most followers. I've tried pushing a lot of the same content through YouTube and
Yeah.
TikTok and stuff like that, but it just kind of hasn't gone anywhere. And then the big thing is I keep trying to point back to, like, my two most recent times I've been pulled over. I have that on video. And so, they're out there. You can find them. And I'm trying to show people, like, we don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be afraid when you're calm, you're collected, you're cool. The nana boo boo isn't going to get us anywhere. And arguing the law with a cop on the side of the road isn't going to get us anywhere. It's stripping away the titles and reaching man and man. Like the last time I got pulled over, I just told the cop, I go, well, the government's ran by warmongers and pedophiles, man. And they're not going to get any of my
I did watch that one.
None of them.
Yeah, and
Brandon
the guy was cool. The cop was really cool about it. Didn't he? He gave you a warning, or? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, come on.
He goes, oh, I get that.
Okay.
No, he didn't even really give me a warning. He just said, some other one might pull you over. They could take your car. He said they would have every right to take it. And I go, well, right. I argue the semantics about them having the right to take it.
Have you had any instances where you were arrested or your vehicle impounded?
So when I first tried doing this, 2019, I gave my license plate back and my driver's license back to the DMV, and I printed up my own that just said boycott. And I drove around on those for like 3 or 4 months before I was followed by cops like a few times before any of them decided to pull me over. And then when they decided to pull me over, I just tried to stonewall them. I was doing the nana boo boo stuff. Like he's like, oh, I need to see your, the cop comes up to the window and he goes, you're in violation of vehicle code, blah, 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 blah. You don't have a license plate. I need to see your ID. And I go, well, it's my understanding you can't ask for my ID unless you can articulate a crime you suspect me of committing. And he's like, oh, well, I just told you, vehicle code. I go, no, that's code. That's code, brother. Code's not law. And there's nothing in my car. There's nothing on my car that would indicate that I'm bound by the code. And that escalated so fast, and everything was calm. I was super calm, but they ended up bringing out like 8 or 9 cops.
Oh my God.
They put spike strips down in front behind my car. They had me surrounded. And then they eventually ended up, arresting me about 45 minutes later.
You're kidding me.
And then they impounded my car, and then they sold it before my court date.
That sucks.
And, well, this is the tyranny we live in. And, and that was the last time I went to court. And then after, I more or less got laughed out of court for standing up for my rights and pointing out the rules, I just decided I'm never going to court again. I'm never going back. If you want me in there, you're going to have to drag me in handcuffs, because I'm never, ever, ever going to willingly walk back into court in that scenario ever again. The judge offered, he goes, I can waive all the fees and everything if you're willing to go down and get a driver's license. And I was like, no, I'm not going to go get one. And he goes, okay, well, the fine's normally like $450, but since your car's gone, I'll knock it down to $325.
Yeah.
I go, oh, geez. Oh, thanks. What a guy. And he goes, can you pay that today? And I go, I'm never going to pay it. I'm never, ever, ever going to pay it. And he goes, well, you got till next March to figure it out. And one time I got a letter in the mail from some collection agency in Texas trying to collect on that debt. But I don't use my social. I don't have an income stream that they can tap into and take. The bank account I have is a trust account, so they can't even levy it. To a degree, I kind of feel like it's Grand Theft Auto. I'm just trying to rack up my fines.
Well, so that's
court and see what
for
happens.
People who aren't familiar. When you were talking about sovereignty, the sovereignty space, that is not sovereign citizen. A sovereign citizen is a misnomer. You can't be a sovereign and a citizen. It is. It's kind of like conspiracy theorist or assault rifle or any one of these made up terms that they come up with to make things sound really scary. And if you encounter anyone who's calling themselves a sovereign citizen, you should run far away from that person because they're ignorant. But sovereignty.
Well, it's funny, actually, the cop asked me, he goes, "Are you a sovereign citizen?"
Right.
And I go, "Well, what's that?" And he couldn't answer.
Right.
He couldn't.
Well,
He
so
couldn't even define what
the
it is.
people who are
So,
going, there's a lot of interest in the sovereignty space, which is why we had Brandon Joe Williams on. I am one of those people. But something that you pointed out, and this is my wife, she's like, if I didn't have you, there's no way in hell I would ever go down this road because it's too much paperwork. And in the beginning it is. And that's what I enjoy about Brandon's approach is he sits down with you, like side by side, and he's like, this is all you got to fill out. And then you don't ever have to do anything again. Once you have your passport, he has his own plates that he had printed up, the diplomatic plates. And, he got his DOT number as a private carrier. And then he's out. Once you've killed those contracts, you don't have to play that game. And it sort of acts as a buffer so that you do have plates on and you do have an ID to show them. And, it does, you don't have to get into a sketchy situation with
the issue I take with the DOT is you're
right.
still applying, which means you're still asking permission. And if you're free and you're sovereign, you don't ask permission. That's it. Yeah, I'm glad that a lot of people are going that route because it's like the step toward completely is going, hey, we're not going to be regulated at all. But personally, I like the church approach. So I do have ID. I have a church ID because I'm a minister of my own church, and I went that route. I went that route because legally, the jurisdiction of the church is above the jurisdiction of the state. And right there in the First Amendment, it says Congress shall make no laws respecting the establishment of religion. And in Section 4 of the California Constitution, it says the same thing. Legislators shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. And so my religion is that I'm spiritually obligated to reject systems that utilize force or threat of force to regulate peaceful and cooperative behaviors. And so if from the legal aspect, I'm going to play the church card for a while and see
That's
where
excellent.
that goes.
That's excellent. I've never thought about the church
pretty well.
And I actually I've studied quite a few people who are ministers in that way, and that's kind of their angle. Like you, I really want to do the minimum amount of paperwork input, to get where I want to go. I want to make sure that my kids are mine, and as not that I own them, but that they're not wards of the state. And I want to be able to educate my kids how I see fit because I am a product of the public education system, and I'm not a victim in any way, shape, or form. But I can tell you that everything that I learned in that entire interaction, I could throw out 99% of it. Other than the basics of like just basic reading, basic writing, and basic math, it was a waste. It's babysitting. That's what it is. No, it does not.
Yeah, it doesn't take 12 years to teach us what we need to. It's funny. People used to say, "Oh, school's so much better now because back in the day, people wouldn't have more than a fifth grade education." And it's like, it took me a long time to realize like that fifth grade education was worth a lot more than the high school diploma that most kids have today. What they learned in those first 5 years, if you've never done it, look up. I think it's from like Kansas, maybe. There's you can Google the 1890 eighth grade graduation test.
Really?
Or something. There's like, I couldn't pass it. There's questions on there where it's like, wow, these kids used to know a lot of stuff back in the day. But now they fill our heads. This is, I don't want to get into like flat earth, globe earth and, and all that stuff. But what I do tell people is that regardless of what the reality of the shape of the earth is, it really doesn't affect any of our lives on a daily basis. On the daily behaviors of living your life, the shape of the earth means nothing. And because it means so little to the impact of your daily life, why are we taking this prime learning time for children? When they're in early elementary school, they're these sponges that can absorb. And we're just filling their heads with things that don't matter. Why aren't we teaching them breathing techniques and emotional maturity and how to understand who you are?
Instead of teaching them
like
how to be a cog, how about teach them how to be an entrepreneur? What are your gifts? Work towards that. I know just my 4 kids alone, they're all so incredibly different from each other. The same technique that worked with one does not work with the other, or any of the others sometimes. And so it isn't a cookie cutter factory machine. That's not how education should work. But Jake, your grandfather, if you want to share that, man, can you share the story of because it's such a crazy story, like the Cliff Notes version of how your grandfather.
Yeah, he was about 11 years old when his mother passed. So he had about a fifth, sixth grade education, I believe. And it was him and his 13-year-old brother. He was born in 1928. So that would have put it about 1939 here in the northwestern region of Alabama. And yeah, he ended up picking cotton as his basically one of his first jobs for 25 cents per 100 pounds picked by hand.
Oh my.
And that was, so like people here never really had much money. It's always been a relatively not so wealthy region. But yeah, it's he was an incredibly smart man though. His education was life itself. And I feel that most people worth their salt, especially in that generation, they gained their education just through living. And I mean, I watched him do complicated math problems completely in his head and get the right answer more than once. And I was like, how do you do this? And you only went to school till like fifth grade.
Mother or father to take care of them.
No, yeah, for years his mother passed. She got an infection in her blood and passed away. And his father was gone for around about 5 years, and it was just his older brother, who was 13, him, who was 11, their younger sister, who was 8, and their baby brother, who was 18 months. And they took care of each other for 5 years. So, I mean, that life, like, and I think that, even, we're very privileged today. I mean, we have cars and air conditioning and just like amazing things that we don't think about. We take completely for granted a lot of times. So yeah, I think that we live in a very exciting time. But yeah, it's
yeah, man. Well, what Steven was talking about is the fact that the education system, doesn't it doesn't serve us, and we spend all time in it. And when we come out of it, I don't know about y'all, but a big part of my personal problem, and I spent 10, maybe 15 years of my life, I was pissed at the education system. I was pissed at having to spend all this time. I was angry.
Well, his fifth grade education was from a private, schoolhouse type thing, where you think about like there's one teacher, there's like 30 some odd kids of all sorts of different age ranges, and they're doing sort of little different curriculum for each one. But yeah, that just
that's one thing that's really lost too on today's. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Jake.
Oh, I was just saying it's very, very pre public schooling type education, where I think it was more applicable. I mean, he was amazed that I didn't ever take a state of Alabama history. He's like, you don't know the history of this state, but you've been in school for almost 13 years, and he just couldn't wrap his mind around that.
Well, the education system didn't want you to know the real history of Alabama, I'm sure.
Right.
But that's one thing that I think is important for kids too that gets lost in today. Other than the time that we spent in high school or elementary school or junior high, when's the last time where everybody you're around is your exact same age?
Never.
That's right.
Never. Because that's not good for our development,
No.
And I think there's so much value in those old schoolhouses where there were a wide range of kids that were in there, because it helps kids learn from kids, and it helps with socialization and understanding different thought processes and maturity levels and things of that line. I think a lot of behavior issues partly are tied to the fact that some kids don't have older kids to look up to learn how to mellow it out a little bit sometimes.
And that's part of it.
Right.
Okay.
Gentlemen, well, I'm gonna have to go. But
how about that,
Jeremy? How would you like for me to step out? Well, that works out. Hey, Clayton, how's it going, buddy?
Timing.
Thank you, Jake.
That works completely. Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. It's great to meet you, Steven. I'll look forward to seeing your posts on Instagram. I followed you today. So
thanks, man.
Yeah, I will be in touch, guys.
You're coming in.
Bye, Jake.
You're coming in where we're talking about the public education system and just how good time, good talk, and how it doesn't create a well-rounded individual, and it certainly doesn't encourage free thinking or critical thinking It's really more about being a cog. You know, we are all just kind of sharing our thoughts on it. And something that I sort of started, I know that for, like I said, about 15 years of my life, I was just angry because I felt like I was a victim. And a lot of that came from my time in school. And I wasn't bullied. I mean, I had a good overall experience, a positive overall experience in school. I just felt like it was a waste of my time, and it did not serve me in the workspace. In fact, I went very alternative ways of funding my adventures, mainly because I wasn't a good order follower. I mean, that was really my problem, is that I'm not very good at taking orders. So I don't know. I get the sense, at least from your Instagram page, Steven, that's kind of like your own feeling. We're in the same generation. We're both Gen Xers.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. Well, it's like on the deeper level, it's kind of like, I believe in what I like to call the pillars of tyranny. And pillars of tyranny are strategies utilized by tyrants to control the masses. And the DMV is a representation of one of those, because one of the pillars of tyranny is restriction of free movement. The another pillar of tyranny is the divisiveness, right? That they keep pumping out into us. And then one of the strongest pillars of tyranny is the indoctrination, the education camps, and that's what the government really truly is. So the it they've streamlined the indoctrination of us, because now it's not just like they have to put all this effort into indoctrinating kids in the school system. They have now indoctrinated parents raising indoctrinated kids, and we're doing all the effort for them. And it's a testament to Jake's example with his grandparents about, or his grandpa, only having a fifth grade education in one of these little schoolhouses in 1928, and they're
Clayton, you're in with Steven, the model anarchist. Steven's mission, we're going to rehash this real quick just to get you up to speed. Steven's mission is to inspire people in the state of California to remove their license plates on November the 5th, on election day, and an act of nonviolent non-participation to say, you know what, I'm not participating in this thing that you're calling capital S state of California, and the tyranny that goes along with it. And I really respect that angle,
Yeah,
and especially because it's peaceful. And I mean, if you're not doing anything, it's I love the decentralized form of protest. That's beautiful. And for me personally, decentralization is the way forward. It's the way that we're going to it is the only way we're going to take control of anything, whether it's through currency or governing yourself or any other thing. It's going to be decentralized. It has to. Otherwise, we're going to end up in some weird dystopian future, with technology being what it is now.
We're already in a weird dystopian future.
Yeah.
I agree in a lot of ways, man. In a lot of ways.
Well, I mean, you look at the RNC convention, and you got Trump going, it's Hulkamania, Trumpomania, ripping his shirt off, and it's like, first off, okay, wrestling's fake. Why do we have this guy who's fake? It's like a nod to the fact that all of politics is fake, but it lines up so well with the movie Idiocracy, where
yes.
they're doing this whole political movement, and it was like, wow, almost line for line the way that they were talking was the exact same thing. And it's like, yeah, we're in this weird mix of 1984 and Brave New World and Idiocracy all kind of blended into one.
Yeah, do you think that that's kind of helping wake the populace up? Because I don't know about you out there, but here, and this is a very small slice of Americana, but man, I am having conversations with people that I couldn't even imagine getting into just a few years ago. Now, Clayton is in a bigger city in Alabama, so it's a little, there's a little more action going on there. But what's it like for you?
I don't know how much it's waking people up. Like after the assassination attempt on Trump, it was like this religious fervor, and it was now impossible to talk to Trump supporters, because that's all that they're talking about. They're running around with a bandage on their ear, and they're not hearing anything that anybody has to say anymore. And now they're putting all their eggs in that basket. All their eggs are in the Trump basket, and it's Yeah, I think it was actually. I think all this hype is a bad thing because as people get dumber, which that's the goal of the education system. As people keep getting dumber, then they're more susceptible to the sensationalism. All of politics is theater for slaves, and so the dumber the slaves get, the more theatrical that the politics gets. Then the more they dig in, the more they buy in. And it's I can see what you're saying. It does. I think it does wake some people up, but other people, I think it just digs them in deeper and into where they're almost unreachable.
Yeah, what have you felt, Clayton? What's it been like out in your neck of the woods or in your conversation circles?
Oh man, I don't know. I'm disconnected from some of it. I mean, and some of it I hear is like what you would suspect to hear here in the South, the rhetoric being more conservative leaning. A lot of the things like immediately when you texted me that Saturday, Jeremy, and told me about it, I was like, that's it. That just won the election right there. And there's always open for surprises. And I mean, we're both people that are like, just have fun with the rhetoric because you see it for what it is. Like, it's like you said, it's real, unreal TV, unreality TV,
Yeah.
experience. Like, to me, like when I watch it, it absolutely is an opera in a bad way, like that wrestling is, just like hokey. Like, you can't see this, it's frustrating, and I get sometimes I get even wondering too, get pulled in and very guarded against whether it's all a psyop. Like it's hard to let myself go down trails too much anymore, to dig into things too much. Like really, I just kind of like to see what the general, again, to use the word rhetoric, is that floats out there, is how I get a lot of my quote unquote information, or like little tidbits about what's going on in the world. Like I'm not too apt anymore to really dig into something other than self-betterment stuff has been the journey that I've been on.
You got to shut off the noise.
Yeah,
Podcast.
yeah, you got to look at it from a macro
But I did
perspective.
have a question, since we're talking about the whole Trump thing. Is do you find, Stephen, and do you guys find a lot of people in spheres, let's say, that are pretty close to ellipsing, like our spheres, like whose interest is piqued by the sovereignty stuff, and the idea of a country over state? Like, do you still find them really conservative leaning? And that's a steering question because I do. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I'll tell you this. It's to me, I try not to listen so much to what people are saying. I kind of watch what they're doing. And so a lot of people out there, especially on the MAGA right, they say that they love freedom and they say that that's what they want. But then when you make suggestions like, well, maybe you're not free if you have to have a president, maybe you're not free, and then they just shut down and they don't want to hear that. You even mentioned the elections, like as soon as that assassination attempt, that's okay. Trump wins the election. But does he? I mean, none of the elections have been legitimate ever.
No.
So
No.
so what are we doing? And all the MAGA people, you talk to anybody that voted for Trump in 2020 and they'll tell you, oh, Joe Biden stole the election. It was rigged. Okay, so then why are you going to vote this time around? The elections are already rigged.
Yeah.
Apparently Trump, as president, couldn't secure the election. So what makes you think now that he's out of the office that the elections are going to be secured? And that it's not going to be worse or just more the same thing. And he might win the election, he might not, but it has nothing to do with the way we vote. These people run around screaming, talking about voting harder. Like, how are you going to vote harder? How are you going to vote harder? I don't get it. I don't understand what that means.
It's
no, this time we are voting hard. You don't understand.
Yeah, I'm going to vote so hard.
So hard.
Man, it's very disempowered, right? Everyone is looking out for someone to save them. And that's what the part that is disheartening. What makes me feel good is that I realize in the grand scheme of things, there's not a very big amount of the population that's voting. You're talking about 150 million people in the 2020 election that actually voted. So you have 200 million people or so that are just like, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's all bullshit anyway. Like if I have to pick the lesser of two evils, and I always say this to people, like, well, you got to pick the lesser of two evils. Then you're making a conscious decision to let evil lord over you.
Yeah.
And what does that say? Right.
And that's what your vote really means.
That's
when
right.
You go to the ballot box. When people tell me, oh, well, if you don't vote, Stephen, you don't have any room to complain. And I go, no, bullshit. Because you go to the ballot box and you say, I think this is the best system we've got. and I'm going to cast my vote, and then I'm agreeing to be bound by whatever the results of this election are. So
Right.
you don't have the right to complain,
Right.
because you're all in on the system. I'm
That's
saying
right.
there's got to be a better way.
That's right.
And you know, Clayton, a little bit, it just kind of came to me to get back to what you asked about if I'm finding more people are kind of leaning toward the sovereignty side of things. With what I'm trying to do, like I'm looking for 7 million people on November 5th to take their license plates off. And this isn't just for California. This is for the entire nation. With 7 million people, and I believe there's 7 million of us out there, at least 7 million of us out there that are already this sovereignty minded type of people. So with 7 million of us, that we outnumber cops 10 to 1, because there's only 700,000 full-time police officers in this country. And the one thing I think everybody's unified on in this country is hatred of the DMV, because we all go there and go, this is dumb. Why am I here? And the employees there, they call you customer, but they treat you like shit, you know. And it's and once that ball starts rolling, it'll be unstoppable, because there's a lot of people that go, oh no, I'm not going to do that. I got to pay for my roads. And it's like, they'll still look around. If they can look around and see enough people without license plates on and go, those guys are, you know, quote unquote, getting away with it. Well, then why am I paying the DMV? And eventually it will just snowball into this thing where we can collapse. If we can collapse that pillar of tyranny, the one that's restriction of free movement, and we build like this collective confidence in ourselves and in our abilities to choose for ourselves and to cooperatively work together, the rest of it will fall like a house of cards. And so I only have so much patience to talk. Once I realize somebody's all in on government and can't wrap their head around this idea that there doesn't have to be one, or even a lot of people can't even wrap their heads around the concept that government's fake. It's not even real. It's just an idea. You can't meet the government any more than you can meet Santa Claus, right? There's a building and we call it a government building, but if we put a Starbucks in there, we just call it a Starbucks instead of a government building, because it's just a building, you know. And yeah, I like to, in my comedy, I like to use this analogy, and I kind of actually picked it up from Larkin Rose. I don't know if you guys
yeah,
know
I'm familiar.
him. Yeah, so his book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, he drew this comparison between Santa Claus and the government. Like it's the same thing. Like you can't meet the government, you can meet someone pretending to be the government. That's all the mall Santa is. And really, when it gets down to it, they all like little kids sitting on their laps.
Yeah, that's and that's the other part of this too. Is so here you have very real, very lack of a better term, scary issues like the Epstein list, like like the things that have, even the P Diddy stuff. Where is any accountability? Where is any client list? Where is any actual evidence of any of this stuff? It's all, like it all poof went away, or we're told, sorry, it's too much for you to handle. It's because that they're protecting people. And so if you know that this government, this entity is they're a bunch of pedophiles, they're definitely not, they're tax dodgers, they're definitely insider trading. It seems like an assimilation of the worst traits of humanity. And yet, if you dare suggest not having it, people are like, oh, we would degrade into chaos. Would we?
And then they always go, and then the biggest gang would take over. I go, what do you think we have right now?
Right.
The government is the biggest gang.
That's right.
But if we could decentralize the power, we wouldn't have fallout and skirmishes on a global level where there's millions of casualties. We would have it down on. We could revert warfare back to where a bunch of men with axes go out to a field to kill each other, and we leave the women and children alone. Right. We're not destroying infrastructure and whatnot. Yeah, it's when people express to me what their fear of a world without government looks like, they inadvertently end up describing government. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I had thought about exactly that before. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
man, for people and it's not coming from a place of like betterment or self-righteousness, y'all. Like, oh, I've got so many things figured out. That's not it. But I damn sure have the two-headed snake like long been done with that. So yeah, you lose patience with people. And and you get overwhelmed sometimes by the, like what seems like pragmatic action and what doesn't, and yet I'm still stubbornly optimistic, but I'm also,
oh, so am I.
It definitely helps having learned, for lack of a better term, the law of attraction, just the natural, like the laws of the universe, that the way things really work. It's important to be optimistic because I do think we shape reality with our thoughts, and that's where the more cats that tie that in to the sovereignty stuff, the more digestible and applicable it's been for me. When I first started diving into the contracts killers course, though, I had, like Jeremy, you had mentioned earlier, dipped my toes into the water, so to speak, with the concept of sovereignty, appealing, very enticing as it would for anybody because of the thoughts of just breaking free of the constraints, and how the immediate, what would that feel like? What would life look like? But I'm also a very pragmatic and reasonable person, and, guarded against pipe dreams, which is what a lot of it seemed like at first. But then it seemed a lot more tangible, like, okay, people are doing this. And with this tangible, it felt very overwhelming by what we were talking about before, the amount of paperwork, or which directions do you go, this or that.
Or the change, the change of living, right?
Everything. My circumstances, if when I go all in, like, I would imagine some things would look different and go away that I don't know that I'm necessarily ready for to be completely altered.
Well, damned if the Matrix ain't convenient, right? They make the Matrix very convenient. I mean, I have a 16-year-old daughter who we have gone back and forth on, like, she wants her driver's license and she wants it now. And I'm like, do you really? And we've gone down many deep discussions with her. And I said, as soon as you get into the system, now, like, why would you do that? Why would you willingly put yourself in? Because you want to drive now. What's stopping you from driving now? Well, I don't have a license. What do you need a license to drive? Are you capable of driving? Well, what if I get pulled over? What if you do? And so we need to, I'm trying to get her even to break out of it. And it's because friends, and a 16-year-old girl is not the most confident person, no matter how you raise them or what you put them through. Especially when they have friends and families of their friends who ask, oh, are you going to get your driver's license? Because that's what you do in the Matrix, right? And so it's difficult. And I've apologized to them many times for being the kind of parent that is so unconventional that makes them have to, explain themselves. And so we try to equip them with the verbiage and the understanding of why we're doing it. We're not just crazy. We're not just off our rockers. We're not just raging against the machine. Maybe 15 years ago, that was definitely me. I was just pissed off. But now it's coming from a very deeply spiritual place. And if there's one thing that unites all of us in this space, no matter where we are in our belief, or on the spectrum, we've all gone through some kind of spiritual awakening to where we understand that we are all connected and nobody is separate, and that there is something bigger than us, and we're more than these physical bodies. And this game that we're playing right now seems really serious, but come on, man. In the grand scheme of things, it's really not that serious. And so it's made me question everything, everything, and no, it's very easy to look around the world and see how we're doing things is not working. Not only is it not working, it's not sustainable. We can't keep playing this game because it's going to exterminate all of us one way or another, whether it's a weird Terminator Skynet thing, or we just fuck the planet over so bad that, that's it. We can't live here anymore. And so we've got to start figuring a new way forward and not just talking about it, but actually doing it. And so that
was one thing that led me to where I'm at with my ideas is I was coming across so much content, so many podcasts where it was people pointing out what the problem was, but there was no solutions being offered.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
That's so
I'm solution oriented, especially here lately. Again, pragmatic, practical. All right, well, what are we going to do about it? Because because the bitching phase, been there, done that. And there's a lot of great presenters on anarchy and natural law. And I'm thinking of Mark Passio, shout out, love your stuff. But brother, your pessimism sometimes where, and I mean, I get it, man. I get it, but it can steer people, if we're all co-creators here, to that over our personal overwhelmed hangups and all those things. If we project that upon not only ourselves but each other too, if we're content creators and sharers, then we're leading people down a path of, like, the same nihilism, which are some of the tenements of the Satanism that we're trying to escape in this system here.
I do like to call myself the optimistic nihilist because on some level, I don't think any of it matters. But
Right.
for whatever reason, I'm here in this game and I'm playing it. So how am I going to play it? One thing that I think it was Alan Watts that said, he said, the moment you die, you laugh and you laugh and you laugh at everything that you thought was your grief. And it was kind of like this, that really stuck with me and resonated with me for a long time.
Yeah, I have a suspicion that you probably dabbled in the psychedelics, and that seems to be part of the path. Again, like if you go through some sort of spiritual awakening, you inevitably end up in some sort of psychedelic experience. And I had one in particular that often with me, they're themed, right? There's always a theme that goes along with the journey. And there was one in particular that it was all a joke. It's like, what is so serious about, like, what are you so afraid of? What are you so hung up on? What is that? Who is this you that you keep pointing to and questioning and demanding people listen to? And, it really strips that ego part of you down and plugs you into the actual matrix, instead of, or I should say, unplugs you from the matrix and plugs you into nature, into God.
God's matrix. It is a matrix, It is another projected system, but it's the one of conscious.
Well, and it seems like we've all kind of, guys like you guys like me, and like you said earlier, Jeremy, like there's tons of us out there that are making content like this constantly, and it's because we're all just pulling from the ether. We're all just pulling from the source consciousness, and these ideas have been put out there. And this is kind of like, with the whole license plate removal thing. I know there's enough of us that are frustrated, and I know there's enough of us willing to stand up. We just got to get organized on an idea that people go, okay, that works well. And I think this is, I don't want to sound too biased. This is the best idea I've come across, but I'm sure there's other ideas out there.
It's a very, it's simple. It's a very easy, not a super scary thing. And, let's face it, man, if you are so afraid that you can't even remove a license plate, like that's something to really ask, okay, well, wait a minute. What am I so afraid of? I love the acronym. I love the
that's
acronym.
testament to the level of tyranny we live under.
Right.
Yeah.
I love the acronym for fear, false evidence appearing real, and I more and more and more I see that apply in my own life. And it's like, fear is the only thing that's holding you back from actual progress. Change is the only constant in the universe. So you may as well get behind it or embrace it, because otherwise you're going to get run over by it, or you're going to get somebody else's version of it. And I promise you, it's not going to be the one that's best for you. And so simple things, while someone might hear you say, oh, take your license plate off. What's that going to do? It's going to get you a ticket. Big deal. You get a ticket. Learn how to discharge.
We're not going to pay them.
Right. No, right. Well, then I'm going to get a warrant. Then learn how to discharge it. Learn how to take control of yourself and be free. So many people, and this goes back to what you're talking about, people in the patriot movement, right? These people who are so big on liberty and freedom, then they are the least free people. They're not liberated in any way, shape, or form. And if you challenge them and on it, they get violent in some instances. They'll want to want to fight you over it. And it's like, is that freedom? Did you just show me how free you are that you're going to pound me into a pulp because you're so free? I don't think so, man. That's showing how unfree you are, how enslaved you actually are. And it's triggering. For a while, I would call people slaves. I have a little law group that we meet, like once a month. And I took to calling people slaves. I'd walk in and be like, what's up, slaves? And you would see everybody like, and it's, I would laugh and I'd say, hey, I'm a slave too, but I don't like it. It sucks when you hear it like that, doesn't it? And one guy in particular, he's like, no, but it's a way to inspire action. That's where I'm going, It's like, I'm not trying to demean you. I want us all to move forward. That's why I'm doing this silly little show, is I want to help people, I know what I went through. I want to talk. I want to connect with people like you so we don't all feel so alone, or like we're crazy, or like, we don't become nihilists,
Well, and also, the battle seems so insurmountable right now. It's such a hard thing to think about changing our system the way it is. And for our parents' generation, it would have actually been easier for them to change the system. And their parents, it would have been easier. And you can keep going down the line, and it would have been easier and easier and easier the farther back in time you go. And so if we don't do something here and now, all what we're doing is we're leaving a harder battle for our children to fight.
That's right.
You know, my daughter's also 16, and we've been talking a lot about driving. And she goes, well, I don't really want to go to the DMV and have to deal with standing in lines, but I also don't want to, you know, have to get pulled over. And I go, well, listen, you got to choose your heart. It's hard to go into the system and deal with all that bullshit, and it's hard to get out there and have to talk to cops when you get pulled over. But if we could stand together now, and we could make it a new standard where cops aren't pulling people over for victimless crimes, then that makes it safer for our kids. That makes it easier for our kids to get out there. And you know, really, that's what our duty is right now, is to go, okay, if we don't do anything, we're just leaving a bigger battle and a bigger monster for our children to try and slay later.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. As a parent, definitely feel the responsibility for the future generations. You know, and
now more than ever,
our lineage, and ones too that I believe we very likely reincarnate back into, you know, not back but forward into.
I feel like if I get to reincarnate into a better life, I'll be a dog in a good home.
They do have it made. That's true.
Oh, they do have it
argue
made.
that we are dogs in good homes. No, so I wanted to ask you guys, practically speaking, again, what would you pick? 4 things, 4 steps. All right, removing our license tags does sound like a badass way to organize, and action again is something I'm very serious about now. But for our listeners and for myself, whether it be revocation of election, and whether you care sharing what steps you've taken, what you have done, what you would recommend, again, 4 or 5, let's say, you know, for people to do, and like do this year. Like if you're getting into this shit, you know, here's some of the easier, more digestible things. Definitely do this. I did this, and this is why, and this is what my life has looked like as a result of it.
Okay, I stumbled across some YouTube channels back in like 2017 when I first started learning this stuff. And so I went through the whole creating a trust and getting an EIN number for the trust, and opened up probably the best thing I did for myself was open up a bank account in the name of the trust with the trust EIN. And it turns out my best friend is the branch manager of the credit union I go to.
Perfect.
And so he was able to call the levy department and go, hey, if a levy came in on this social security number, would it touch this account? And they go, no, it won't. So that kind of leaves me, not that I have a lot of money anyway, but it just still leaves me free and clear from, you know, traffic court trying to
good
levy.
solidarity to stand on, move forward from that, because we want foundations and like a safety net. Safety is an illusion, and I understand that. Yet at the same time, some people feel like to be able to springboard forward, like have a solid base, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, people want to know where they're headed and what they're jumping into. I mean, at this point right now, when people ask me, I point them toward Brandon Joe Williams. Go through the Contract Killer course. I think it's probably the most put together and easily digestible body of work that's out there right now.
And it's lighthearted.
What's that?
It's lighthearted because the sovereignty space is full of really pissed off people.
Right. Yeah.
That was what turned me off to it, is that, you know, like Clayton and I both watched a lot of Yusuf L. I don't know if you ever came across any of his stuff. And Yusuf is
Yusuf L. Yeah.
He's super knowledgeable. But man, you can get him going on an hour-long rant, you know, anger rant about a comment, you know, in the comment section or something.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know. And he doesn't share a lot of his processes, and it's more of like,
people want to know personally, to an extent, what processes people have gone through. You know, at the same time, people like myself, I respect someone's privacy to an extent. Well, maybe there's some personal details wrapped up in there that they don't want to divulge to. That's understood. But yeah, Brandon definitely made it digestible and, like you said, entertaining along the way for something that could otherwise be very mundane for me at the time when I was going through too, and on this etymology kick, and my synapses were firing a little quicker than they have been lately. I got to get back to that place. But anyway, I was tying a lot of loose ends. It made a lot of sense to me, kind of already along the journey. But I would imagine for people to enter, I would point them in that direction as well. The creation of your trust account in the bank, that's okay. That's great. That's awesome. Anything else that you want?
Yeah, what the other thing I really try to explain to people is we've got to understand that your freedom does not lie within paperwork. Your freedom lies within your behaviors and the way you view yourself and the way that you view this world that we go into. And so I try to stay as far away from paperwork as possible, but I do think that starting to do the paperwork for me was a big part of how I got to where I'm at now. I don't think I could have bridged that gap without starting down the paperwork trail. And Clayton, you missed this one. Here's the other thing that I talk to people about too. I started my own church, and I printed out my own church ID. And the jurisdiction of the church is above the jurisdiction of the state. I don't believe in the state, but I understand that a lot of other people believe in the state. And so a lot of times I have to talk to them in a way that they might be able to understand. And so starting the church and having the protections of the church is huge, because everywhere you don't even have to file paperwork to make your church recognized by the state. All you have to do is declare that it exists. Because the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. That means they can't require anything of a church in order for a church to be legitimate. There's no minimum number of practitioners. There's no paperwork that needs to be filled out. There's no how long it has to have existed for. And then when you get into being the church, like I have a church license plate. I don't have it on my car right now, but I have it in my car. I keep it in the dash. Unfortunately, I haven't had to express this to a police officer yet. They've always let me go once I just tell them I'm morally opposed to participating with these systems of force. But from a legal aspect, my body is church property. Because my body houses a spark of the divine. So it's a temple. And that's reinforced by pretty much every other major religion out there, right? Yep. And then because I have the church license plate in the car is also church property. And so by the state codes, 18 U.S. Code subsection 247 lists some pretty severe penalties for destruction and damage to church property. And so, listen, if at some point they want to impound my car, they're going to have to smash that window and drag me out. And then we'll see what happens on the back end of all that. But yeah, just, there's a certain amount of understanding, like this is all a game. We're playing a game, and a game is defined as a set of rules that you modify your behaviors around in order to achieve a goal. Anybody who's playing a game who doesn't take the time to learn the rules of the game, you're going to suck at the game, and the game's going to run you over, and you're never going to have a shot at winning, right? And so, yeah, I would point people toward the paperwork aspect, but also got to reinforce we say it all the time, especially fathers of daughters. A restraining order is just a piece of paper. It doesn't actually do anything. And that's what all of this is. The Constitution is just a piece of paper. Your revocation of election is just a piece of paper. And with the paperwork gets scary for people too, because it's like, oh my God, I signed it in the wrong color ink, and now men with guns are going to come in and lock me in a jail.
Right.
So yeah, my big action that I point people toward: you want to be free, take your license plate off. It's no different than a cattle tag in a steer's ear. It's not there for your protection. It's not there for your safety. It's there for them to control you. And restriction of free movement. I think people don't understand that vehicle registration in the Department of Motor Vehicles is one of the largest contributing factors to poverty that we have ongoing in this country. Because if you're in the hood and you don't have any money and you can't go get a driver's license and you can't pay registration fees, then you don't have the ability to travel. And they go, oh, well, public transportation. No, bullshit. Anybody that's got to spend 4.5 hours on bus rides to get to their job, you're burned out by the time you get back.
That's right.
That's horseshit.
I've thought about the automotive spider web that is everything it is to have a car and have the paperwork, like you said, in the society. I was thinking about it here recently. I accumulated another vehicle and going through the registration process. I'm like, God, I hate this, and a little bit hate myself too for doing this, Clayton. Like, you should be. Why do you even have a driver's license?
You know better.
For the insurance scam too.
Right there, of making those moves. But it feels really good in my heart to hear you reinforce that too, that the paperwork is maybe a partial representation at best.
And it might give you a layer of protection. maybe a small layer.
The makeup, because I am, I'm not even who's talking right now. Somehow I'm the watcher, I am the divine breath. There is, I'm granted this grand trust upon my being here as the beneficiary, the trustee, and the
I
admin
think
all at the same time. That is, it's a head space and it's a heart space first and foremost. And I do feel more free going through my waking day and the decisions that I make to dabble between both worlds, and trying to have the best of both worlds for myself, if that makes sense, the sacred and the profane, what parts of the matrix that are serving me right now, and letting go more and more quickly of those that aren't, and wanting to take some damn radical action too for myself and our future generation's sake as well, to actually, fucking do something.
Oh, dude, if you go and return your driver's license that first day that you go driving home from the DMV, you're going to feel so exhilarated.
Yeah.
You're going to be, am I doing something wrong? No, I'm doing something right. But it's like, feels wrong, but it feels right. And
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
blood starts pumping. And yeah, it's amazing.
Feels like swinging some big old balls.
I think it's the paperwork, to circle back to that just for a second. That's just the external representation of
Definitely
being free, right? And I had someone ask me, "Oh, is it going to stop a tank rolling up your driveway?" No, it's not going to stop that. But if we have a tank rolling up my driveway, that's the paperwork is the least of my problems. Like, what's the fucking tank doing here? To begin with,
Right.
And it again, it's just overcoming this fear that something bad is going to happen because you said I'm not a slave anymore. And to your point, Stephen, and even if you were to include all of the military, there's less than 2 million total armed agents, and that would be every other alphabet agency and everything, to stand against a country of 330 million. Come on, man. And I'm not advocating any kind of gun battle. That's just standing up and saying no, I refuse. They don't have enough handcuffs. They don't have enough prison space.
The jails are already at capacity. They're
They
already
are around
overflowing.
these parts. That's for damn sure. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's for
What are
sure.
you going to do? Lock me? Sometimes I have this weird fantasy about I end up in prison and they go, all these guys are talking about the murders they committed and the banks they robbed. And they go, what are you in for? Well, I didn't have a driver's license.
yeah.
But
Again and again. Yeah. So
the paperwork aspect's important if we don't collapse the system. But if we collapse the system, then the need for the paperwork goes away.
That's right.
And that's ultimately my goal we could do it quickly and peacefully and the controlled demolition of the system if we do it through organized and decentralized behavior changes. Like after November 5th, and if we're able to collapse the DMV, the next step is to get small business on board, get a coalition of small businesses together that stand up and go, you know what, we're going to stop collecting sales tax. We're going to stop collecting pay or income tax, and we're going to stop paying payroll tax. And if we can free small business from the tax burden, then all of a sudden small business is going to be able to offer better employment at lower pricing than the big box stores.
That's
and
right.
We'll have this middle class just start rushing back. And we do in with all of this stuff, I guess the big thing, and this act goes back to your question, Clayton, the big thing that we have to get people to get into their heads and understand is their attitude toward the jury box. If you get, like, I can't, because I don't have any ties to the state anymore, I don't have any contracts, so I can't get called for jury duty anymore. But when you meet somebody that does have jury duty and they start talking about all the ways that they want to try and get out of it, we need to encourage people to try to get on the jury. Because in criminal court, it just takes one juror to say not guilty, and the government is prevented from punishing the defendant. Right? So do we want to end the war on drugs? I want to end the war on drugs, but we're not going to do it by voting in the right politician. We're not going to do it by empowering the police. We're going to do it by convincing people that are convicted or being charged with victimless drug-related crimes to, instead of taking a plea deal, take a trial by jury. And then as jurors, we can say not guilty. And when the courts get enough hung juries for the same type of case, they don't even bother changing the laws. They just go to the police and go, hey, stop regulating that behavior. You're gunking up our revenue stream. Right.
I love that.
And so
I love that
idea.
So
with the taking our license plates off, with the getting small business to stop paying tax, and with the war on drugs, with whatever social cause that we want to go out there and fight, it can all be backed by jury nullification. And this is how we peacefully regulate a tyrannical government, and we slowly tear their system down while we build our own without having this big fallout of suffering and loss of life and everybody starving. You know, like how ridiculous. I'm sure you guys have heard some of it in the news, like all these different farmers. I think the most recent one is in Pennsylvania. The guy's in trouble for selling raw milk. Like, what are you talking? The penalties for selling raw milk in California are actually more severe than if you're dealing in cocaine.
Man, I watched a horrible video of this family in Michigan who got raided by all these various state agencies because they were daring to sell animals that were not USDA certified, and they slaughtered their animals. They shot them all, you know, because they had guns and they could. And so this
And
whole,
does that sound like freedom?
yeah, exactly, right? And they'll say, "Oh, that's just Michigan. That's what you get when you get progressives in there." You're like, "Look, man, they're coming for you no matter where you are.
Right.
It's just a different version." You know, and that's what we try to hear, where people are very conservative and you know, definitely more on the right end of things. One thing I will say is people here, like when during 2020 when COVID happened and they had mask mandates, that shit lasted for about 2 weeks. I'm not kidding you, like 2 weeks. We went into the store one time and had somebody say something about, you know, not having a mask. And then pretty much everybody was like, we're taking our masks off. Fuck that. And, you know, and so people who wanted to wear them could wear them, and people didn't want to wear them didn't want to wear them. And they had the little directions on the floor of the supermarket. You know, you go down this aisle. That lasted for about 2 weeks until people were deliberately going down the wrong way. Like, what are you going to do? You know, because there's a rebellious spirit here in this specific part of the country. And
well, you know, and you guys are good bullshit sniffers.
Yeah, well, that's true. And, you know, the learning the history of the Reconstruction and understanding how the South was railroaded and how they were, that's how we got the 14th Amendment. You know, like we got this amendment that wasn't officially legally passed because they sent unelected people down here to represent a state that they had just subjugated. And that people still remember, like, I'm still a damn Yankee. And they say it funny, you know, and a damn Yankee is one that comes and doesn't leave, right? But I get it. Like there's just old timers that still refer to me as damn Yankee. And it's because they remember what happened, you know, and it wasn't about slavery, man. It was about being told what you could and couldn't do, you know, in your own place.
Well, you know, I ask people this all the time, and then, you know, I just get the blank stares. You know, if the North fought the Civil War over slavery, why is it then, you know, all these white men went to go die to free the black man, and then as soon as the war's over, we start treating them like shit and locking them up on victimless crimes and hanging them from. No, it was. And then the 13th Amendment actually didn't end slavery. People say the 13th Amendment ended slavery. No, it didn't. The 13th Amendment made the government the only legal slaveholder.
That's right.
Right. We gotta understand our history. But you know, we get so many lies in the news. Our history is so bastardized that I almost give up on trying to figure out what actually happened in any part of history, or at least I have a certain amount of willingness to understand I'm wrong about whatever it was I thought was there. I like to say it all the time when people tell me things. I go, "Well, I wasn't there. I don't know."
Yeah. You know, you have to be that, and we have to be that way now. It's that we have to be that guarded, you know, because we've allowed them to take our stories and make it his story or her story, you know.
Homeschooling has definitely, I've learned so much with my kids, especially in history, because I'm a history nerd. I really am. That's like one of the things that I really dig. And it's just because it's so different from the way we were told. You know, when you start hearing the perspectives of the men who were there in their words, it's like, wow, what a crazy, you know, I don't know if you ever read or heard of The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. It's the story of the Federal Reserve. And in a lot of ways, it's in the words of the men who participated in it. And it was a conspiracy to subjugate a nation, and they knew exactly what they were doing. It's not like some rich guys got together and, you know, screwed you over. No, they knew exactly what they were doing. And the people who weren't on board, well, they were on board the Titanic, literally, and they sunk. How convenient. And the Titanic was owned by J.P. Morgan. How convenient. You know,
who backed out.
Right.
the day.
Right. And it was insured. All these coincidences. And so you either believe in coincidence, which I don't, because even if you do, if you have more than 3 coincidences, you don't have coincidence anymore. You have a pattern. Okay. And so I don't. There's no such thing as coincidence. It's serendipity or it's conspiracy.
Right.
It's really one way or the other. And I think the spiritual path, this one that we're all on, one way or another, what it does gift you with is it gifts you with the ability to feel truth. To feel, like when you hear capital T truth, you know it. You feel it. And that is what's bringing us all together is this feeling of like, hey man, something's really wrong here. And if we don't do something about it, we're not going to have the ability. Like it does feel like we're living through probably one of the most interesting times to be a human on the planet, because
Certainly exciting.
it really is. It really is. And that's why I'm optimistic. And if I don't listen to media and I try really hard to stay clear of it, it's when things like the Trump shooting happened, I couldn't help it. I'm getting texts from family members like, oh my God, did you hear what just happened? So you got to tune in and see what's going on in the show. And then you get sucked in a little bit. And if I stay out of it, I'm so much more positive and hopeful and optimistic. But if you are constantly watching the show, it's like, God, man, forget it. I may as well just go shoot myself and be done with it.
Well, and I kept reminding people too, like we don't have the truth about JFK's assassination. We don't have the
Right.
truth about Lincoln's assassination. We don't have the truth about whoever shot Reagan and for why. Like
Right.
we never get the truth out of the news and the media. So whatever is coming in right now, what do you want me to get worked up over? Because
Right.
it's whatever it is, it's not the truth. Whatever the news is telling you, it's definitely not the truth. It's the whole once a liar, always a liar. And the one thing you can point at for all news organizations on December 24th, they'll tell you where Santa Claus is. And because they're all a bunch of fucking liars.
Yeah. Yeah, man, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I don't know, man. It's really excellent to continue to network with people like yourself, Steven. I applaud your mission. I do.
Thanks.
And I'm on board. I mean, I'm already rolling with out tags as it is.
Good.
So, it's okay. I'm really big on, I would like to educate law enforcement, actually about law. And I'm finally a part of a group. I started taking jujitsu with my daughter about a year ago, and I had no intention of staying in. It was a class of grown ass men, and she was the only female, and I just wanted to make sure she felt comfortable. And I got hooked, and I'm like borderline obsessed with it. But a lot of the guys that are in there are in law enforcement, but they're good guys. These are not like power hungry tyrants. These guys are struggling with their job, but they're also now they're invested. They've been there for how many years now, and then like they're nearing retirement. And one guy in particular is just like, he's so sick of what he sees in law enforcement, but he's about to retire, and he doesn't. It's like you don't want to upset the cart. And so,
well, what we got to explain to cops, and especially you can help them out with this is like there's room for you guys in in the new system that we're trying to build, because we still need a law enforcement type organization. We just need to cut out all the tyrannical side of it.
that's right.
All the things that you're doing. See, the hardest thing, in my opinion, about being a cop is you're constantly faced with making the moral decision or the legal decision.
That's right.
And the majority of the time, the moral and the legal don't line up. So we wanted you to take your altruistic attitude about being law enforcement, about being a cop, come over here into this new system with us, where you're not going to be forced between the legal and the moral. It's always the moral.
You're a
Always
justice of the peace. You're a justice of the peace. You're not a law enforcer.
You're not a police officer from the policy office of the DMV.
That's right.
Right? Because these cops spend 90% of their time, working for the DMV more so than they do working for the people.
That's right. Well, it's something that my wife pointed out once. She's like, she got pulled over, and my wife is not a very good order follower either, and she's not always diplomatic in her discussing with people when she's pissed at them. And she got into it with this lady officer who it got tense, and she was like, she goes, here I am with my kids in the car, and because I won't comply with this lady about a sticker on my fucking license plate, I felt like she could shoot me over it. And it's like, how messed up are you? And that goes back to this point you had hammered on earlier. Are you really free? when a sticker on your license plate can get you shot on the side of the road because you don't want to do what the person in costume demands you do. It's
because ultimately, if you decide to run because of that sticker, they'll keep increasing the amount of force they use against you up until the point of your death.
That's right.
And they'll feel justified in it as long as they're wearing their special costume.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that we have had a very productive conversation on this stuff. And
I've enjoyed it for sure.
I could go on and on and on. I tend to get long winded, so I'm trying to learn to back out and let other people talk.
Less is more sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one thing I learned about comedy is you got to cut the fat.
Yeah, I do want to ask you about that real quick. So when you do comedy, do you really get into some of this stuff with people, and how is it received?
Yeah, a majority of my comedy is very anti-government. That's where I put my focus at. I've got I get a lot of positive feedback on someone like my DMV jokes and things like that. Pointing out the ridiculousness of, the DMV calls me their customer, but the reality is like there's a whole department of men with guns who are forcing me to be here. So, like, you're my extortionist, I'm your victim. It's not
right.
Stuff like that. Yeah, comedy's a lot of fun. It helps me learn how to cut the fat, and I think it's a great medium to get people.
I think so too, because I think it was effective for Carlin. Maybe too effective for Carlin, if you know what.
I've got some unpopular opinions on Carlin, but you're right. It worked well for him.
It worked really well. I'd be interested in what those are.
Well, so if Carlin was truly against the system like he claimed to be, he wouldn't have had a career for so long. They wouldn't have kept putting him on HBO.
I've wondered myself.
But the people that run this world, I think, are highly spiritual. And part of their spiritual belief system is the ritualistic mocking of their victims. And Carlin, I think, was an aspect of that. He would go out there and go, you guys are all a bunch of idiots for paying taxes. This is why. And everybody would laugh, ha, ha, ha. And then they go out tomorrow and pay their taxes. But I try to, because Carlin never really answered any solutions. He was just up there pointing out everything that was wrong.
He was just bitter.
So I'm trying to figure out how to add in solutions into my comedy too, not just complain about and point out what's wrong.
That's beautiful. That's great to hear that you've spent enough time consciously developing this thing, and that's practicing service to others. That's great. That's great.
And it does really feel good when you have this energy exchange with people, and you feel like you genuinely gave them something of value. Because they enjoyed their time, you enjoyed your time. We all got something out of it, and it's a rut. If either of you guys are interested in public speaking or comedy, I highly encourage you to go do it.
I more and more I really enjoy speaking in front of people. I really enjoy teaching, and apparently I'm okay at it. At least people tell me that, and so it's encouraging. And what I like watching people's faces when they have that aha moment, like when you said something that landed, in a way that made someone go, oh, you know what? You're right about that. Man, that's a great feeling. Yeah, no.
Some of my jokes, I get to see that in the audience member's eye, and I'm like, oh man, I just fucked you up for the next 3 months.
It's a great feeling. I'm a performer as well, and the energy. I play music and
great,
and sing my songs, and the energy exchange is very real, and it's one of the most rewarding things. And there is no there is only like the dark selfishness, and then what I've been calling divine selfishness. Every act in service to others is an act of self. We could take something even from the most smallest things of like buying a gift for someone. Ultimately, part of us does it because it feels good to watch other people feel good for receiving.
Yeah.
And if we can just be more consciously aware of that, I think when we create, and really of what we're trying to put out into the world. We do take a lot of detours here on the show. Some of them are more subject oriented. I have noticed that this one we've gone all over the place. I've really enjoyed that. I think you have a very interesting psyche and soul, and it's been a pleasure talking with you. I think this stuff here is important. I don't take myself or what we do too seriously, like God's gift to earth or some shit like that. But in a way, we all are. But I guess what I'm saying is that these conversations are near and dear to my heart, and I know to a lot of other people too. Like a lot of people listen to podcasts, and while we may not have numbers here and any just like one channel, for all of these streams to keep crossing in the way they have is just awesome, because they help me to the point of actually taking action in my life. Like, yes, it is here, men and women talking, but constructively along the lines of like, what action are we taking in our day-to-day lives? And that's why it's just been an awesome thing. It's great to have this time with you gentlemen too, where we don't have to compress it into a sound bite and we can expand upon things.
Well,
And
you get a sense of who the people are on the other end, right? It's not just a 30-second reel or a TikTok, whatever. It's we're just a couple of guys, like trying to figure some shit out, and we all recognize that something's really wrong, and it's so wrong that we know that we have to do something about it. And unfortunately,
Well,
most of the things that we're told to do about it are not solutions.
go protest.
Yeah.
well,
Vote.
we're warriors in fighting a fifth generation warfare, and right now we're actually utilizing the most powerful weapon that we've ever had, and that's social media. Like,
That's
we
right.
never would have been able to have this meeting of the minds if it wasn't for our social media and our ability to communicate. And so we've got to take this ability to communicate and transpose that into this ability to organize, so we can move as one. Because once we start moving as one, we're just kind of all jumbled around right now, and we're going through this learning period of trying to figure out how to weave all these streams together. And I think all in all, I know you guys are too, but I'm pretty optimistic about the way it's going to go.
Oh, I am, man. I just in seeing how the Matrix responds to people, like just watching this Trump thing from a more macro level, and watching how their lies are falling really flat. And it's like the more they try to lie, the more obvious it becomes. And it really feels like from 2020 on, something dramatically changed. And it's like the wheels started coming off their bus. And they've only really got a couple of plays, and that magic ain't working anymore. And
Well,
they're getting death.
have you ever heard of Jason Christoff?
No, I've not. I'm not familiar.
Okay, well, he's got a pretty. It's called The Psychology of Freedom. Is his podcast? I think it's on SoundCloud. But he has this thing where he says there's this weird quirk in human nature where the more we comply with things that we view to be ridiculous, the more likely we are to comply with the ridiculous.
Mm,
So I think they kind of use that a little bit, that we're so turned around, we're already complying 1,000 times with these ridiculous lies and things that they expect us to, that it's kind of training us to continue to do that.
sure. Well, they definitely have very little regard for the common people, and I think that's part of their undoing as well. Is they're so
I think they
far
hate it.
removed and so far insulated from us. Listen to I don't know if you're familiar with Noble Harari from the World Economic Forum. He did a TED Talk, and it was the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. And these guys, like talking about how they've conquered nature's God, and now we don't ever have to be afraid of dying. We can live forever. We can download our consciousness into a computer and then upload it into a bio-robotic cyborg, basically, and we're going to shoot ourselves to Mars. And it's like, all I heard that whole thing was someone who was terrified of dying. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
And they're so insulated from the regular person, that it's almost insane. It's like it's a brand of insanity for sure. And these are the people who are supposed to be directing our way forward. Oh, come on, man. How can you take that serious? I don't know. So I don't know. But these types of conversations and this format and beautiful souls like yourself, man, that is why I'm optimistic. And we just keep coming out of the woodwork. And it's something that another podcaster that Clayton and I have listened to over the years, shout out to Ralph Smart at Infinite Waters. He says they thought that they tried to bury us, but they forgot we were seeds, and we're sprouting.
I like that.
We're sprouting, and they can't keep us down anymore because there's too many of us. And so
keep doing this, guys. Keep getting that voice out there, and I'd appreciate it when you talk to people, if you can start working the November 5th, take your license plate off into the conversations, because
for the 5th of November.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's so funny the way it all just fell that way perfectly. It's the November 5th because it's the election day, and then
that's genius.
Yeah.
No, it was just lucky. It's just lucky that happened to be the election day. So
yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
I will.
Anyway,
I definitely will.
About 7%. What's that?
I definitely will work that in because I love that concept, of just, people are all, again, like Clayton said, we're all looking for solutions, and we this is a very simple step, and it's like, God, if you can't overcome just that little bit of fear, even if you do it for a day, okay, so it was an exercise, it was an exercise in your own little, like, fuck you to the man, and even if you put it back on, but the fact that you did it,
but at least try it.
That's right. And the fact that you did that, you took that one action, as they say, you once you start going down this path, I couldn't ever go back. And I'm like in this weird place right now. I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to do business wise moving forward. I am not an employee. I'm not an employee, but I was never taught to be an entrepreneur. So I'm like trying to learn how to be an entrepreneur late in my life, so to speak. I don't feel like, like I'm going to die anytime soon. But in the normal model of things, I'm kind of late to the dance. But I also, it's taken me a long time to sort through my own shit, to the point where I could actually be productive and be willing to take some sort of action. And now more than ever, as being a father, I understand that it really is in your kids. I couldn't ever put my kids into the same system that I was in, and that's no shot at my parents. They didn't know, like, I came from a broken home, so my mom was working all the time and my dad was working. It was like we didn't have the luxury of homeschooling, and it was,
and that broken home is by design.
That's a fact. That's a fact. And that's a whole other conversation, man. That's like a whole other podcast that we could do, because that is absolutely true. That is absolutely true.
Well, I'd be more than happy to come back on with you guys.
Okay, cool. You know what? We will definitely do that, Steven. We will definitely do that. I will. Yeah, I don't know for sure when, because our schedules are all so jacked up. But I'm definitely down for that, because I really enjoyed it.
A couple to get through. We got our next one it's going to be a juicy one. It's duality and dogma. It'll be a 2-part one.
Because it's all BS. It's all your belief systems, right? And we both come from, because Clayton is he's my half brother, but we are, as far as I see, Clayton's my brother, blood through and through. But we come from a very, traditional Christian upbringing. And so there was a lot of, and I'm proud, and it's easy now to say I'm not a Christian. I'm a follower of the teachings of Jesus Christ, but I'm not a Christian. Jesus would have made a great Buddhist, but he unfortunately he didn't make a very good Christian. And I don't know if you're familiar with William Donahue, but I found him. No, oh man, check him out. He's such a cool guy. He's dead now, but he's got like 500 videos on YouTube, and it's all. Oh,
yeah, send me a link.
I will. I'll do that. I will.
Gnosticism and the Gnosticism, and then the, let's call it, the legalese and sovereign worlds are like almost, it's inseparable, because the word sovereign definitely, to my mind, it takes precedence over any of like the legal stuff anyway. Like that stuff is an inclusion in what it means to be exactly what we are anyway. We just forgot that we're
all pieces of God.
The solvent, the solution, Anyway, yeah, we could go on, and we will, and all these